Hello, I am Sandra Lee. So, today is my guest expert interview with John Welch.
Hello.
John, John is the creator of the Freeborn Neck Protocol. And let me tell you a little bit about how I met John. I have had a history of decades of neck issues. So, rollover car accident, somebody choked me at one point, to tell you the truth. And so I had some neck injuries, and I have been doing massage and chiropractic for 3 decades, trying to work on getting that out of there. And it was helping, so doing all these things was helping to manage it. And then I reached a point where I was having problems with headaches and doing chiropractic way more often than I really wanted to in an attempt to manage it. Started doing a new type of chiropractic, Nuka chiropractic, and it was really helping. So taking the tension that was in here and the pain that was unmanageable and making it much better. And then I was in a bodywork class doing something positive to help myself. And I wound up having pain here in my upper back and tension and pain in my arm. So brachial plexus, which is a nerve, comes out of the side of the neck, and it was causing all sorts of problems. And the chiropractic wasn't really taking care of it. It would have if I'd let it go, but I'm not a very good patient. I complain a lot when I'm in pain. Not a good patient. So a friend of mine recommended I contact John and to work with him. And I did, and this is all gone. All done.
Love
So,
it.
John,
Hello, Sandra. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm so excited to be here.
you are welcome.
And I love your story. I mean, um, most people will just live with pain, to some degree. And then at some point, it becomes a thing where they're like, you know what, I need to do something about this. And oftentimes, I'll meet people who seem to be past the point of no return, and they're stuck and they don't know what to do. And now their life is really being controlled by the pain, and so that's one of those things where I like to see people who like to get ahead of that curve a little bit, and at the same time, how do we get rid of these weird pains when they show up? And my story is somewhat similar to yours. It was just over 3 years ago. I had some advanced neuropathy in my right arm kicking in, and I had low-level neuropathy in both legs and my left arm all at the same time. But this right arm got really pronounced on me, and I knew it was related to a shoulder injury from about 6 years ago. And so one day in the summer of 2018, I hit the floor, as I like to say, and I began to work on some things that I've done before, but I just did them a little differently. And I broke a few rules along the way. And the next thing I know, I stood up and the neuropathy was completely gone. And my brain was wide open with clarity, like a fog had lifted I never knew I had. And I noticed all sorts of other things like lifelong TMJ. A couple days later, at any rate, I noticed this TMJ was gone. I noticed that my chronically inhibited glute muscles were now constantly working and not needing to be trigger pointed and foam rolled and all these other things. The shoulder injury went from 85% recovered to basically 100% overnight. It was amazing how much mobility I had in my neck, and I have a long story that I won't get into the whole thing. We don't have 4 hours, but I've had lifelong neck issues, and my neck had never felt better, and I had no idea really what I did until the next day I woke up. I still felt this brain thing. The brain thing was the most obvious thing to me. It was so amazing how clear my head was. And at dinner that night, Johanna was making dinner, and I was, talking to her as she was preparing some food. And I was like, my gosh, Johanna's my wife, my neck feels amazing, my brain feels amazing, all these things. And I was touching the back of my neck. And as I was touching the back of my neck, I felt this thing sticking out of my neck. And I thought, oh my gosh, what did I just do to myself? I might have damaged my neck because I had this thing stick. I'll show you. You can see it. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Right here. Okay. So it's right on the spine. I've got a little photo here I can share. I can slide this guy in here. That green depicts the Ligamentum Nuka, as I've been saying it, but I just learned that it's pronounced Nuki. I'm going to keep saying Nuka, I'm sure, for now. But this green is a massive ligament that runs from the back of the skull all the way to C7, and it intersects every cervical vertebra. The outside edge is like a rope or a cord, and the inside is like the sail of a sailboat, layered fascia, tendinous tissue. And we all have it. However, it's been basically dormant in our bodies for the most part. According to Dr. Daniel Lieberman from Harvard University, who's really the only other person on earth I've found who's making any strides to talk about the ligamentum nuka, he refers to it as the nuchal ligament, which is the Western term. And Dr. Lieberman has seen, when he's studied indigenous tribes, that they have functional nuchal ligaments because they are barefooted and they are living on the earth. They're hunting and gathering, and they're not sitting in really sweet chairs like you have, right? And they're not in school in desks from the time they're 5 or 6 years old through grad school, and they're not sitting on comfortable sofas. They're moving and grooving. They have functional nuchal ligaments, where you and me and Dr. Lieberman would point towards our footwear mostly, where we're wearing these shoes that take away the kinetic forces that run through our body as we're walking or running or whatever. And our posture gets bad. We've got these phones where we're looking down at the phones, and we get these weird head postures. And who doesn't struggle in some level with forward head posture? So Dr. Lieberman claims that we are devolving from the ligamentum nuka, or the ligamentum nuka is devolving from the human species. And he would ask that we all start running barefoot. And I'm not disagreeing with Dr. Lieberman. What he's done is brilliant. The people I work with, if I ask them to run around barefoot, it would likely destroy them. And so what I've done is I've created a few simple techniques that literally take us all the way back to birth. Like when we are a day old, right? And we've got little Sandra, right? So like you're hours old, you're day old, you're 2 days old, and you're being held onto. Everybody knows, pretty much everybody I would think knows, if you're holding on to a teeny tiny little baby, you're going to be supporting that head. They just don't have it. They don't have the strength physically. They don't have the nervous system sort of togetherness. So either that baby has their head supported in the parent's arms, or the baby is flat on their back and they've got 5 points of contact. They've got, the left and right hips, the left and right shoulders, and then the head is the 5th point of contact. As they're gaga gooing with their little, arms and legs, floating up in the air, their head is educating itself on how to exist. And it doesn't take long. I can't remember. I've got an 11 and a 15-year-old. I can't remember how long it took, but it wasn't long. It was a couple weeks maybe. And it's like, oh, hey, little Johnny is, supporting his head. He's holding his own head up, right? And it's like this big celebration. And what I've come to believe is that at that point, the point that we no longer have to support the head of our child, the conversation is over, the neck is taken for granted. All of the developmental phases that the child now goes through, from serpents crawling to, cross pattern crawling, to making their way up to standing, to walking and then running and all the things. We never, ever even think about the neck again unless there's a definitive issue that arises. And what happens is if we were just a little bit coached up when that child's really young, and we just ask them to get on the floor, on their back, and we just ask them to allow their fifth point of contact to make a certain degree of smart, minute, corresponding patterns, it would make that child's life completely different. But the good news is, even when you're 49 like me, you can hit the floor and you can start to do some of our poses, like the Northern Star pose, and all these poses, obviously. And you can liven this thing up, or as I like to call it, unleash primal spinal intelligence.
Welcome, Heather. And if you have questions, you can put them in and we'll answer them. So I've been a massage therapist for 29 years, and we probably learned about the ligamentum nuka, whatever, very briefly, like have it described in an anatomy book or whatever, and then no discussion about it whatsoever. No technique for it. And now that I understand how important it is, it's like, wow, there's a big gap here. So what happens if somebody's ligamentum nuka is not working properly?
Well, at this point, after working with people on this specific issue for almost a year straight now, for the first 2 years, I didn't emphasize this within my practice. It wasn't until I really needed to create an online coaching practice that I decided to niche down into this, and I discovered how well it works with people. I thought it was my own little secret, frankly, when I first figured this out 3 years ago. It was my get out of trouble card that I would play whenever I had pain in my body. And nobody does talk about it. It's so strange. It's so strange to me that it's so unspoken. If somebody doesn't have a functional ligamentum nuka, and they probably don't, they just probably don't have a functional one. Most don't, that I've seen personally. All they have to do is hit the floor, get flat on their back, make appropriate compensations, because some people can't lie down and have their head on the floor because they just don't have the mobility. Some people have, this issue and that issue and this issue, so there's certain small compensating factors. But they need to get on the floor and they need to reintroduce the back of their head, the occiput, the occipital protuberance, the inion, there's, the nuchal ligament. I'll start saying nuchal ligament at this point, because now I keep questioning nuki or nuka. The nuchal ligament attaches at the inion, which is just underneath this protrusion. So they just need to get the back of their head into the floor and begin to do some really intelligent things. And they need to get that ligament, because here's one thing I find is very common. People will say, John, how did you strengthen your nuchal ligament? Because mine sticks out of my bald head, right? It's easy to see. And I have a big protrusion. I have a big bump. I have a big occiput, okay? So you really see it sticking out of my head when I hold an appropriate neck posture. we don't strengthen this ligament. It's not a strengthening thing. Muscles get strengthened, ligaments get activated and integrated. That's what we're doing. And what we're really doing here is getting that nuchal ligament to communicate with all of these muscles known as the intrinsic kinetic chain. So from the cranial muscles to the 8 tongue muscles, because we have 4 extrinsic and 4 intrinsic tongue muscles, to all the intercostal muscles, the diaphragm of the ribs, the transversus abdominis, which is like the deep abdominal wall girdle muscle, the pelvic diaphragm, the multifidus muscles up and down the spine, the pelvic floor, like literally that entire group of musculature, which most of us are familiar with is the core. What most don't understand, and maybe not most, maybe many, but is that literally the core goes all the way. It's not just the abs and the low back, which is what I think most people think of. It's all these muscles up into the deep cervical flexor group. So with Freeborn Neck Protocol, what we've done is we've figured out some pretty simple and complex things to do. You know, the way it works is it starts out complex for most people. They go, what? How do you mean? I'm supposed to hold this pose. I'm supposed to activate my serratus anterior. I'm supposed to have my tongue to the roof of my mouth. I'm supposed to have my teeth closed but not clenched. I'm supposed to have my elbows reaching and weaponized. So I'm supposed to have my shoulders reaching here. Like, there's a lot of cues. And so at first it's sort of like we're spinning plates, and when we're emphasizing that we need to hold this and hold this and hold this and hold this. Then it becomes easy. It goes from being complex, and then people just know. They're like, okay, this is how I hold the pose. This is what I do. I just hold the pose, and then later it gets complex again. Because now we start to intertwine this nuchal ligament with the entire body in a deeper way, right? We start to figure out, well, how do I get this to help stabilize my sacroiliac joint? Because so many people have SI joint issues at the base of their back. Or how do I get this nuchal ligament to help stabilize my shoulders? How do I get this nuchal ligament? I've had people with some of the most fascinating responses doing this work. Can I tell a quick story? One person. This is like one of my. I've got 2. I've had a super fast one. I got 2. 27-year-old woman, chronic migraines since she was 10. Basically a constant migraine. She was somewhere between an 8 to a 10 on the pain scale for 17 years, well over half her life. And we got together, her mom, who's an excellent massage therapist herself, who's tried everything for her daughter, sent her daughter to me. And then the very first session, she was able to turn off this migraine. And so she hasn't had a migraine since January. And around the same time, I had a young man, 37, who when he brought me into his life, he was 10 years into basically being home ridden, bedroom ridden, because he was so off throughout his entire body. He had advanced neuropathy in both legs and both arms, a shoulder that was completely disconnected from his body and had zero stability. And we were 20 minutes into the day 1 protocol, which you know exactly what the day 1 protocol is like. Okay, we get into it right away and we get it going. We were 20 minutes into the day 1 protocol, and he goes, John, my legs just got warm. And I said, oh yeah, what does that mean? Is that a good thing? And I knew it was, but I wanted to hear what he had to say about it. And he goes, John, my legs have been freezing cold since I was a teenager. I haven't been able to, I could sit in a hot tub and my legs would be ice cold. He goes, but they just got warm. And I said, wow, that's amazing. And then he goes, John, He goes, I can feel my legs. He goes, my legs have been numb since I was in high school. He goes, but I've got my legs. I can feel my legs. And so he and I are both like basically in tears and laughing at the same time, right? And
Yep.
so we go about the whole week, okay? Because I was going to see him a week later. We go the whole week, and he keeps messaging me, John, I can feel my arms. I can feel my arms. He goes, I can do this. This is happening. This is happening. And then we had our second appointment. And we get on the meeting, and he goes, I forgot to tell you what happened. And I'm like, what do you mean? What happened? And he goes, I didn't even mention this when we first did the assessment, but he goes, ever since I was a kid, my right pupil has been dilated, wide open. It won't close. He goes, in the last 30 years, it's closed a couple times, but then it pops right back open. And he goes, ever since our very first appointment, my eye pupil has been opening and closing normally. It's crazy. So, the only thing I can think of that can possibly explain it, and I want to emphasize, I am not a doctor. I am not a licensed therapist. I don't treat or diagnose anybody. I'm just a movement geek. But the only thing I can think of that could possibly explain his response in his legs and in his eye is that when we unleash this Ligamentum Nuka, when we unleash this thing and we get this thing activated and integrated, it must be creating some sort of space in this very small, area called the neck. Our entire nervous system is dependent on this neck. So it must be opening up the nervous system pathway, particularly the, oh my gosh, I just had a total brain moment here. The vagus nerve.
Yeah. Well, so we have some questions about that.
Please.
Okay. So, address Heather's question about, is this why the chiropractor always has to adjust my atlas? Okay. And then Chris was talking about how massage therapist used to put her fingers on his vagus nerve and it helped. And yes, the addressing the whole body and the organs and all that stuff. So yeah, all of those nerves that come out of the brainstem there, this is going to affect all of that. So, and Chris also says, so for doing the exercise, lay on your back without a pillow. So address those questions.
I'll start with the last one. When on the back, when first getting into it, and there's about 9 steps. Okay, there's about 9 steps that we need to sort of methodically hit on to get the right pose for the person. Some people need a little pillow, some people don't. If you go to lie down on your back and as you're going onto the back, if you can't reach the floor without having your chin sort of escaping up, I usually have people elevate with a pillow so we can get a little bit of a chin tucked position. We don't want a crazy massive chin tuck thing going on. We want it to be right. Caution is big here. And I just want to point out, if anybody has CCI or more advanced issues, they really need to be cautious. Okay. So, as far as the atlas going out, well, it famously goes out for people, many people. I've found that it's a totem pole effect. It's a totem pole. We from our tips of our toes to the crown, to the tips of my fingers, I've got this big totem pole. And if, like, for example, if somebody's SI joint is chronically out, it's going to impact the atlas. If somebody is a chronic habitual, now this is almost everybody on some level, and this is part of the Freeborn neck protocol. I start brainwashing people along this. Those people out there who are chronic arm crossers, hands-on hippers, right? Leg standing on one leg shifters, right? When we're holding these poses chronically, these poor posture poses, it all adds up to the top. So yes, ideally what happens is when we get that atlas centered and in position from a Nuka chiropractor, we should be able to sustain the hold by doing some really nice conscious movement patterns. As far as the the vagus nerve is concerned, again, I'm not a doctor. On some level, me even talking about this starts to sound like I'm diagnosing. There's nothing that could possibly explain some of the things I've seen with people other than the fact that we're opening up the nervous system pathway. We've seen neuropathy improve so much on so many. Some people, they have a harder time because their issues are more advanced. But neuropathy, the vagus nerve, which is the big overriding nerve of the body, in my opinion, we must be helping to open up space for those in the neck. And once we open up the signal, the body wants the signal. The body's craving the signal. So once we open up that signal, then game on.
Yeah, so the vagus nerve has a branch that goes to all of the organs. And so it's really important for all of the organ function. And the vagus nerve is also really central when it comes to calming and centering and balancing and dealing with stress. And so your massage therapist, just helped to activate that vagus nerve so that you could relax, basically, chill out.
It's one of the things I hear most frequently with people when they get into the Freeborn neck protocol is they just feel more calm. They feel more calm. And you get to turn it on whenever you want because you just have to hit the floor a few minutes a day. We're not asking for hours of work with this. I mean, if somebody's willing to dedicate 15 minutes a day to some of these protocols, it's 3 parts. It's doing the work. If I can get my hand on the screen here, doing the work, 15 minutes a day, maybe more, maybe less, depends on what you need that day. Which means you're going to hit the floor and you're going to get your 5th point of contact intelligently designed into the floor. 2, we're going to get Kaizen principles in play, meaning we are going to strike particular poses like the Rocket Man, as I like to call it. That could be seated like I am now in my kneeling chair. I could be standing, but throughout the day, I ask people to strike a pose 4 to 6 times an hour for 2 seconds, maybe 5 seconds. That's it, because we need nervous system hits, so we strike the pose, right? We strike the pose. And then the third part of the Freeborn neck protocol is we just get conscious to stop throwing sticks in our own spokes all the time. And this is where we need to sort of, pay some attention, because there are people who will just chronically shift onto one hip. They'll chronically, put those hands on the hips, right? All of this stuff is brutal. It's just brutal. It's a deal breaker. So we emphasize that a lot. And then, and once you're striking this pose 4 to 6 times an hour, it becomes almost difficult to pull these debilitating habits. We get those habits out of there pretty quickly for the most part with people. It's surprising how quickly people can shift.
So John, tell people how they can work with you, how they can start doing Freeborn neck protocol themselves.
Well, there's a couple ways. If somebody's more advanced, I do highly recommend one-on-one coaching like Sandra has done. Meaning if they're more advanced, if they have advanced levels of pain. We're dealing with small margins of windows that we want to see people working within. You don't need to be in advanced pain to work with me one-on-one. So it's, the options there. There is freebornneckprotocol.com. And there's also freeborn.fitness. So those are my 2 primary websites. So it's freeborn.fitness and freebornneckprotocol.com. The online course is located at freebornneckprotocol.com. And, the course is $297. I just added a new coupon code this morning, FNP 144. So you can get the course at over half off for $144. And we get into it at a deep level. We get into the different poses and how to go about constructing, Freeborn Neck Protocol into your life. It's supported in a private Facebook group. So, and we're actually looking at adding a new app now. I just am planning to get a new app in play that is super slick that I think will make the experience even better. We're gonna keep dialing this thing in and supporting it like crazy, because there's a lot of people who have neck issues, and this is what I found: all roads lead to the neck. I've been doing this corrective exercise thing for over 20 years. 29 years prior to that, I grew up in chronic pain. My whole childhood was filled with, this hurt and that hurt and this hurt and that hurt. And this is really why I got into all of this stuff, is because of my childhood. And, but all roads lead to the neck. The core gets so much emphasis, the stomach, and we should be emphasizing strengthening the core. It's important. But what I've come to find is that I could be giving somebody with low back pain or hip pain or knee pain or whatever, I could be giving them certain protocols for any of those things. None of it works as well as it could or should until we get the neck in play. So no matter what anybody has, the first place I'm starting is with the upper cervical spine and getting this Ligamentum Nuka to come in. If you look at it, it's like the sail of a sailboat. It is a massive, humongous, enormous ligament that is just sitting there waiting to do a job. And all we need to do is to just teach it how to work and keep it in play, and amazing things happen.
Chris, this will really help you with that injury. Absolutely.
What injury is it? Now I want to know.
He was in a car accident.
Okay.
Or she was in a car accident. Looks like a she. Chris was in a car accident. So
whiplash type symptoms are so common for the neck. Me, I had tons of concussions in high school that now I realize were more due to neck instability than due to probably the impacts. I love it.
Yeah. So really all of it. So it's like your whole body will be helped. And then, getting into the more advanced exercises, engaging the whole body. So it's not all up here what's happening. So
we get from tips of the toes to tips of the fingers involved on the very first day. This is really what makes it work. It's activating this nuchal ligament. It's getting it completely immersed with this intrinsic kinetic chain and the entire fascia network. To give you an idea of how fascia works, I've got a good example here. Can you see how this arm over here is all swollen and puffy, and see how this thing is like that? That injury, I got that injury in 8th grade, summer after 8th grade, carrying heavy oval trays of food as a busboy. This led to about a decade of sleepless nights, waking up in tears, and developing an addiction to painkillers. It hurt. And when I was in my mid-20s, the range of motion on this hand and wrist was like this. So I'd wake up in the morning, because I coached myself to sleep with my arm up in the air and my wrist like this. This is how I could sleep. Oof. That's how I could sleep, because I would just lay there and I would be like this for hours, and then eventually it would wake me up, and I'd be like, so I'd wake up in the morning and I'd have to peel my fingers open, and I'd finally get my hand open a little bit, but at that time my range of motion of this wrist was this. I couldn't bend this back. Now, when I first had this injury, I just dealt with it, right? I'd go in, because I was an above average high school football player. I never went to college and played because of the concussions. I think I could have played on some level, but I felt like they were going to hit harder in college than they did in high school. But I would go out and play football and tackle people and tear people down and do all these things in high school. And then I'd get home at night and the arm would start to swell up because the adrenaline was wearing off. And then in the middle of the night, it would kick in and it hurt so bad. So I went to a doctor in my mid-20s, and I said, "Okay, doc, what's the plan? Do you have any solutions? Because this is really getting bad now in my mid-20s. It kept getting worse and worse." And he goes, "Here's the plan. We're going to slice open your arm. We're going to scrape off all these calcium deposits on your bone, and we're going to put it back together." And I said, "Okay." I said, "What's that going to do for the pain?" And he literally laughs at me, like in my face. He starts laughing out loud, and he goes, "Oh, it'll probably make your pain worse." And in that moment, I thought, you know what? Nobody cares more about my pain than I do. And I also knew when I ate like this and drank like this and, slept like this and behaved like this, like the pain was worse. And when I ate like this and slept like this and drank like this and behaved like this, the pain would get better. Right. And so at that point, I said, you know what? I'm going to figure this out. So I set at it, and it took me about 6 months to turn off the pain. And then it took me quite a while to finally get my range of motion, right, open. It's still, something I feel. If I go out and act like an idiot, I can turn the pain back on. Like I built a fence in the summer, which wasn't really acting like an idiot, but it was a lot of hard labor and a lot of strong impact slamming poles. And it turned on this pain for like a week. And I remember thinking, I'm like, oh my gosh, this hurts so bad. This is just, a couple months ago. I'm like, oh my gosh, this hurts so bad. Because I started to wonder if I exaggerated how much it used to hurt. Like after 20 years of not really having this pain, I'm like, oh no, it really did. It hurt a lot. But this is fascia. The whole reason I brought this up, I didn't get this diagnosed properly till I was 40 because the medical community didn't properly diagnose it. This is shredded out fascia. So this is basically the insides of my body trying to come out my skin because this fascia is broken down. So what we do with Freeborn Neck Protocol is we get the nuchal ligament interconnected with the entire intrinsic kinetic chain of musculature because it's that musculature that offsets the tension of the ligament, starting with the tongue. And then we get the fascia network simultaneously integrated into the whole thing. And this is what makes it all work.
Okay, well, so thank you, John.
Thank you.
Everybody, I will have a link for John's program with a discount code for you in the text that goes with the video. And so thank you, John. You're amazing.
Thank you.
Tomorrow for Thursday Tips for Thriving at 9 a.m. Pacific time, I'm going to be talking about posture and the neck and forward head posture and devices and all of that stuff, and talking about that as part of a continuation of this theme. So thank you, everybody. Leave in the comments what you thought of this, what you appreciated about this. And if you want more of these guest expert talks. Next week, Karen Lieba Baker is talking about sex, money, and power. So that's going to be fun stuff. And look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.